Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Mercola, helping you take control of your health. And today we are joined by Dr. Satchidananda Panda, who is really one of the leading researchers in a very important topic about your health that many of us really don't know enough about to optimize our health, and that is the circadian rhythm. And he's written a book recently that was published in the summer of 2018 called The Circadian Code, and it's really a great read and written at a level that is easy to understand and has lots of good, solid information there. So welcome and thank you for joining us today, Dr. Panda.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and I think we can start with the way you got into this because it's interesting. Obviously, you're from India, and like many people in India, which I think it kind of vies for, I think China's probably a little bigger country, but it's definitely one of the biggest countries in the world. And agriculture is big over there. So I think that was your initial thing because you grew up in a rural village with your grandfather and started doing that. And then you progressed into molecular biology. So why don't you tell us about that journey and how you got to the United States?
Well, as you pointed out, I was exposed to agriculture pretty early on in my life. My grandfather had a farm, and during summertime I would go there and mingle with my cousins and see how they lived their life. And it was interesting because the village did not have electricity, and whole day everybody was out in the backyard. The children were playing or doing some chores, and then the adults were working in the field. And it was 2 or 3 square meals, and everything would shut down around sunset. We would have our dinner, and then there was very little light at night. And I used to get my best sleep during the summertime. I didn't know whether it was too much activity outdoor or it was more quieter at night. But that really intrigued me. And then the journey kind of continued. I went to an Aggie school, and in Aggie school, I realized that different plants flower at certain time of the day. And what is interesting, it's not in the book actually, is I did very well in Aggie school, and people who do well in Aggie school in those days, they used to.
Excuse me for a second. It's Aggie school, agricultural school?
Agricultural school,
okay,
yeah, in agricultural school. And they used to go to become a plant breeder or plant geneticist, or many of them went to banking. And I realized that.
Yeah, if you're really good and want to make a lot of money, go into banking.
Yeah, or if you're into academics, then you do plant breeder. And then I realized, well, if I were to become a plant breeder, then I had to work on rice, and rice flowers at 4 a.m. in the morning. And that means I had to wake up very early and go to the field around 3 o'clock and do some pollination and all that stuff. That did not attract me. I thought, well, too bad, rice flowers at 4 a.m. I'm not working on becoming a plant breeder, so I moved on. But it was curious to see why rice flowers at 4 a.m. and why certain plants flower at certain time. And then a few years later, when I was thinking about grad school, I realized that there is so much thing about biology of time. Every biological system depends on time. Just like throughout the day, we have a clear timetable when we should be doing this and that and meeting people, having conversation, having dinner. Every organism has that. And we haven't learned the biology of time. And that's why I got excited about circadian rhythms, because this is a universal timing system starting from pond scum to humans, elephants. Every organism has to go through this 24 hours timing schedule. And if this is disrupted, then plants will flower at the wrong time, animals will not reproduce well, and in humans, lots of different diseases can happen. So that's why I got excited about circadian rhythms and got into
and where
my
are you
PhD.
at now? What university?
So now I'm at the Salk Institute. It's a non-profit research organization, and it's in San Diego, California.
Okay, great. So, and I think I want to get into the exciting components of the genes, the clock genes, the circadian genes that are each, and as I understand, are in each and every one of our cells. And the discovery of those genes, and I don't know I forget the researcher, we did an article on it, but he was awarded or maybe it was a team of individuals awarded the Nobel Prize last year.
Yeah.
And I think you're a research team that was in contention for that too, weren't you, with the clock gene at Yale?
No, I won't bring myself up to that level because, those are really the pioneer early in 1970, 71, when no one was believing in circadian rhythm. That's when they started, and that's the year I was born. So,
All right, but you were doing research in that area before
yes,
they awarded
yes.
the
So, so there's three: Michael Rosbass, Mike Young, and forgetting on the last one.
But they all got the Nobel, right?
They all got the Nobel, and they really did the foundational research long time ago.
Yeah, and it's true that these genes are pretty much in every one of our cells, right? These circadian genes that control everything. And if that's true, and if you could tell or at least describe succinctly how that's all orchestrated, because it does seem to be a massive mess to coordinate that.
Yeah, so that's the very interesting part of circadian rhythm. And at the same time, you got to recognize that this field is unlike any other field of biomedical research where every other field is trying to cure a disease or study an organ system, whereas circadian rhythm is all about timing. So there is no primer even to how to study this. So the bottom line is almost every cell in our body has its own clock, and in every cell, the clock regulates a different set of genes when to turn on and turn off. And as a result, what happens is almost every hormone in our body, every brain chemical, every digestive juice, every organ that you can think of, its core function rises and falls at certain time of the day. And these are again coordinated. For example, your growth hormone might rise in the middle of the night, in the middle of our sleep. And at the same time, if there is not enough food, if there is not food in our stomach, then the stomach lining will start to repair. And for that repair to work perfectly, the growth hormone from the brain has to coincide with the stomach repair time. So in that way, different rhythms in different part of our body have to work together for the entire body to work optimally. So in fact, to have these daily rhythms in sleep-wake cycle, being more alert in the morning, having the bowel movement at the right time, being more, having better muscle tone in the afternoon, etc. These rhythms are the fountain of health. That's the indication of health.
Yeah, and to try to micromanage that would be arrogantly foolish. It would seem. And that, as you discuss in your book, it's just really paying attention to ancient traditions that our body has that we can honor. And by doing this, it sort of takes care of itself. It all goes back to normal. And is that correct?
Yes, it's almost like, just think about going to school. In a school, say there are 6 or 7 different periods, a lot of different things are taught. The best thing, the first thing one has to do to learn anything at school is to show up at the right time. And similarly, to leverage these daily rhythms that are so ingrained in our body, we just have to do a few things: sleep at the right time, and eat at the right time, and get a little bit of light, bright light during the daytime. So that's the foundation that we can do. Very simple things to reap the benefits of this circadian rhythm and the wisdom of our body.
Okay. And I think that when most people hear circadian rhythm, they think about the most common anomaly with that, which is shift work.
Yeah.
And prior to reading your book, I really was somewhat clueless. I thought it was a relatively small minority of the population that engaged in this activity. But I was shocked. Well, first of all, let's define it. In your book, you define it as anyone who works, has them, work requires them to stay awake for at least 3 hours between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. for more than 50 days a year. Yeah. Basically once a week. Yeah, and then there's this professor you acknowledged, Professor Ronenberg, a researcher in Munich, surveyed 50,000 people and found that the majority of, and actually by the first definition, that's 25% of 25% of the population. Unbelievable, of the non-military workforce. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's 1 in 4 people.
1 in 4. Just imagine every firefighter, every police officer, first responder, even these days, half of your Uber driver, taxi drivers,
yes,
and nurses.
I frequently have to take. I use Lyft instead of Uber, but I frequently have to take one when I'm traveling, to catch a flight. And I'm glad they're there, but I really hate doing that to their biology.
Yeah. I mean, you can do a simple experiment. Whenever you are checking into a hotel, you are taking a lift, you just ask the driver, what time did you wake up? What time you are planning to go to bed?
Yes.
And you'll see that easily, not 1 in 4, you'll see 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 might have been going through this disruption around us, and we don't even think about it.
Yeah.
So that's the cool thing, that we have been living with these 24-hour rhythms for last 150 or 200,000 years, and we are just waking up to the foundational impact of these 24-hour rhythms on our health.
Well, we technologically have not had the ability, the capacity to violate these ancient circadian rhythms until like the last 100 years because of the cost. I mean, obviously we had fire for a long time, but when you're going to have lamps and have oil to burn that fire, it became a very expensive proposition to maintain light at night. And even then, the light wasn't that great. So maybe you can expand on that. Because it's just the last 100 years when the electricity came into being.
That's the inflection point, maybe 120 years ago.
Yeah, 120, late 1880s, 1890.
So even in 1850, for example, even though people had access to lamp oil, for an average family living in England, where we have much more data, it would take almost 1 week earning for this average family to light up their homes for 3 to 4 hours, all the rooms for 3 to 4 hours every night. And that's a huge amount of money.
And is it what, 1 week's earning per year or?
No, every month, like
every month? So 25% of their income would have to be devoted to pay for oil to make it light at night, which is obviously
to light up all the rooms.
Okay.
So that's the caveat. But now, so that's why people are not actually lighting up all the room like the way we do now. And right now we spend less than 1% of our, and in fact, in some cases, maybe 0.1% of our.
Yeah, I'm probably closer to 0.1.
To just light up. I'm not talking about heating and cooling and other stuff. Just lighting is less than 0.1%. Yeah.
Well, and what's helped that quite dramatically is the introduction of energy efficient lighting, which is this pulsing LED and fluorescence. Unfortunately, the pulsing definitely uses electricity, but it produces dirty electricity artifacts, high voltage transients, in addition to producing typically very poor quality light in the wrong spectrum. But that can be compensated for even with that, but it can't compensate for the dirty electricity that they introduce.
Yeah.
So, but it's a mess. So not only do you have to deal with the circadian rhythm aberration, but then you have these other artifacts which make it even worse.
Well, this is interesting. Only in the last 16 years, we have come to understand the impact of light on our health. Because before this, we thought that lighting is only for vision, and our eyes just have rod and cone cells to guide us throughout the world. And 16 years ago, myself and 2 other labs co-discovered this blue light sensing light receptor called melanopsin. And these light sensing cells in the retina, there are only 5,000 of them. They are hardwired to the.
Is that per eye?
Per eye, only 5,000 per eye, total 10,000 per human. They're really hardwired to many parts of the brain, and including the master clock in the hypothalamus, and also the pineal gland that makes indirect connection to pineal gland that makes melatonin, and many other brain regions. So that discovery completely changed how we look at light, because it's not only lighting for safety or security, we have to now think about lighting for health. And when it comes to lighting for health, it's not only any lighting, we have to now think about blue light. And again, we have another challenge. It's not that we should get rid of blue light completely. We need
Mhm.
more blue light during the daytime, and we need less, at least 3 to 4 hours before going to bed. So the bottom line is, in the last 150 years, we have created the man-made world without paying attention to circadian rhythms. And now we have the excellent opportunity to recreate, rebuild this entire world that will optimize our health. So, yeah.
So, how much damage do you think we've done from a health perspective from violating this basic cycle that we need to optimize our health? I mean, because there's definitely a price to pay. And what do you think that price is?
Well, so the price, we cannot directly put what is the price, but we can go through, say, literature and then
Mhm.
see one simple thing. If you disrupt circadian rhythm for a week or two, what happens?
Mhm.
And if you go through chronic disruption, just like shift workers
Mhm.
or people who have that kind of lifestyle, then what happens? So, starting from babies all the way to 100-year-old, we know that a few nights of staying awake for 3 to 4 hours or even eating at the wrong time can cause irritation, foggy brain, mild anxiety, loss of productivity, and insomnia. At the same time, this can flare up some of the underlying autoimmune disease. So then, if it continues for several weeks, months, or years, then we can look at, say, workers or people in controlled clinical study. So when we make the list of disease that are contributed by circadian rhythm disruption, there's a huge list. It goes from depression, anxiety, bipolar disease, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, PTSD. These are the mental health issues. And then obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver disease. They affect more than 10% of the population.
Mhm.
And then,
Probably close to 80%.
no, each one affects
Oh,
more
okay.
than
Okay.
10%. And then you bring in gastrointestinal disease, so irritable bowel syndrome, IBD, and even acid reflux, heartburn, ulcerative colitis. So if you combine all of these, then we can see clearly why nearly one third of all adults in the US have one or more of this chronic disease. More than two-thirds of adults at the age of 45 have some of this chronic disease. And 9 out of 10 at the age of 65 have two or more of these chronic diseases.
Mhm.
So now the question is, how much of this is due to circadian rhythm disruption and other factors, or maybe circadian rhythm disruption with underlying genetic cause? We cannot put a clear figure, but it's very clear that if we optimize circadian rhythm, we can really move the needle.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the circadian researchers from, and I forget her name, but she was at the University of Chicago, and I'm sure you remember Margaret or something.
Yeah, so it'll come back to me.
Yeah, but she was a pioneer in this field too,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you know, after reviewing her work and
yeah,
putting articles out on it, it was very clear that if you slept less than 6 hours a night, less
yeah,
than 6 hours, which
yeah,
used to be, I believe, less than 1% of the population, and now it's like 30%.
yeah,
That you radically increased insulin resistance, which is at the core of most of those diseases that you mentioned.
yeah,
I mean, yeah,
yeah,
and you know, some researchers believe that it exists in 80% of the population. I believe a
yeah,
large
yeah.
percentage of that may be related to violating circadian rhythms.
Yeah, actually, that's Ev Van
Margaret
Cauter.
Sanger, isn't it Sanger? No?
No, Ev Van Cauter. She
Okay,
published the first paper in 80s.
it is.
In
Okay, that's what it
yeah,
is. Yeah,
and I think it was a JAMA or Lancet
yeah,
or
yeah.
New England Journal of Medicine, one of those. And she had actually made two or three very key observations in her research. One is there is a daily rhythm in insulin sensitivity. For
Mhm.
example, if you give me a glucose tolerance test in the morning, I may be healthy, but in the evening, if you do the same test, then I may come out to be pre-diabetes. And they used to call this as evening diabetes.
Mm.
You can diagnose a person diabetic in the evening, but in the morning, he or she may be normal. Second thing, relating to sleep deprivation, she published that result, and then subsequently people have done controlled clinical study where healthy individuals are brought into lab and are given sleep deprivation. They sleep 5 or less number of hours per night, or they're given a simulated shift work. And within 4 days, only within 4 days, you can see deterioration of insulin tolerance and glucose intolerance. So that's really eye-opening, because a lot of us, we go through that kind of disruption in a monthly or weekly basis. And shift workers go through that half of their life. And that might explain the rise in glucose intolerance and having 85 million pre-diabetic in this country.
Yeah, it's just great. And as I said, it's just shocking for me to find out that it's really 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 people in the developed world that are shift workers, by that definition of working at least 3 hours between 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. 50 days a week. 50 days a year, sorry.
50 days a year. Yeah, so that's the International Labour Organization definition, and many European countries have that definition.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So that means even anyone with a newborn baby, a new mother, is also going through a lifestyle that's very similar to shift work. And that might partly explain some of the conditions, for example, postpartum depression and many other issues, even with new moms.
Yeah, that is a very good point. But you would think, since obviously we've been doing that since however long humans have been around, and everyone has their own view on that, but obviously it has to be since then. So you would think we'd be optimized for the continuation of species to compensate for that challenge that Mother Nature has provided nursing mothers or recent mothers with the capacity to tolerate that circadian rhythm abuse.
Yeah, I mean, if you there is some change in last 100 years.
Yes, that's a good point, because they got the electric lights in there, which messed things up.
No, the biggest change, yes, that's one big change. And in terms of reproductive age and other stuff, there are also changes. For example, in 1910, the life expectancy at the time of birth used to be 45 years in the US. So both you and I.
That is pretty shocking. Thank you for reminding me of that, because it's not obvious. You kind of think maybe it was 60, 45 years, 100 years
45, 100 years
Gosh,
ago.
you nearly doubled it in a century. That's crazy.
So we doubled it, and we don't even think about it.
Yeah,
but imagine, so Mother Nature had optimized everything for most of us, like 90% of us, to live up to the age of 45.
Yeah.
And now we are living.
Is that 45-year age skewed because there was a high infant mortality? So in other words, there were so many infants dying that there are many people in their 60s, 70s, 80s back then, but it got obscured because of the infant deaths.
So one in 10 used to live up to the age of 90, but now 1 in 4 will live up to the age of 90.
Okay.
So in that way, if you look at the time of first child, or those numbers have also changed. And we know that as we get older, our circadian rhythm also begins to deteriorate after our 30s and 40s. So there are two things happening. First is we have disrupted circadian rhythm, and we have also delayed reproductive decision to later in our life. So those might be doing more harm. We are not optimized for that.
Well, let's get back to melanopsin, because I think that's another important one. And I had forgotten that you were really one of the key researchers to discover that. I'm particularly curious. You mentioned that there's 5,000 melanopsin cells in each eye. So we're born with this, and these cells stay from the time of birth to the time we pass, and there's no way to reproduce them. I mean, in case you damage some.
So we haven't seen any neurogenesis of melanopsin cells so far.
Really?
But these are very resilient cells, and in fact, people who have glaucoma, they're a great subject for learning more about melanopsin. So there are some reports that melanopsin cells may be resistant to cell death in glaucoma. So glaucoma is a disease that kills most of the ganglion cells in our retina, and melanopsin is just one type of ganglion cell.
Okay.
So people are curious whether these cells are different from other ganglion cells. And glaucoma is a disease where people are looking more closely. One problem is, unlike looking at rods and cones, there are a lot of technological advances. We can look at them non-invasively, but there is not really any technology to specifically look at melanopsin cells non-invasively in an aging adult. And the only thing we can do right now is post-mortem analysis to see whether the cells are there and whether they are as sensitive. We don't even know whether they are as light sensitive as they were at the time of birth. So that's a very new emerging area, particularly how the melanopsin cells age and whether their function remains the same or they deteriorate, and what we can do to correct it.
Okay. So is melanopsin the cell responsible for producing the signals for the production of melatonin?
No, they are not the same cells that produce melatonin.
So how does the melatonin signal work? Because that obviously goes up to the pineal gland, which produces it.
Yeah, so the melanopsin cells, they send their axons to different part of the brain, and then there is an indirect connection from melanopsin cells to the pineal gland that produces melatonin. You might wonder how come both of them begin with the word melatonin and melanopsin. It goes back to their discovery. This is where basic science research really leads the way, because both melatonin and melanopsin were actually discovered in the melanosome, or the pigmented cells of frog skin. So when frogs are put outside in sunlight, then melanopsin senses the bright light and signals through melatonin to change the tone of frog skin. So the pigments disperse and then the skin becomes more darker. That's how the name came. So it's interesting to see that this connection between melanopsin and melatonin to respond to light is still present in human, but in a different form.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, melatonin is a very important part of the equation to optimizing your circadian rhythm, or maybe a sort of a target of the consequence of violating your circadian rhythm. So it's so important too. And in your book, you talk about a 6-year-old produces 1/2 to 1/3 the melatonin of a 10-year-old. And I would venture to say that the vast majority of people viewing this on our site are over 60 years old. So that's an important number, 1/2 to 1/3. So what can these individuals, me included, do to optimize their melatonin production?
Yeah, so there are multiple discussion points here. One is the reduced melatonin the cause of many sleep disorders that we see as we get older? And in fact, there are a lot of people who do take over-the-counter melatonin, or now various types of melatonin receptor agonists sold as various medications to improve their sleep. And this seems to work for many people, but at the same time, we must advise people that they figure out how sensitive they are to melatonin. Some people are pretty happy with 1 milligram of melatonin, and some might need up to 5 milligrams. The other thing that most of us can do is to control our lighting, because in the evening, we are exposed to a lot of bright light. Means just imagine 150 years ago, the firelight or the lamp light or even the full moon light was only 1 to 5 lux. Full moon light is maximum 1 lux. And now we have 50 to 100, and sometimes in some of the department stores, it can go to 600 to 700 lux of light in the evening. And that's tremendously high amount of light that will just slam your melatonin down to almost zero.
Well, what about, what continually amazes me, and I rarely am on the road that time, but sometimes when I travel, I am, is the headlights from cars. How many lux are those?
Yeah, those are becoming brighter and brighter with the LED light.
Yeah.
Now, even the traffic lights, you may have noticed few years ago when many cities they changed the traffic lights from old style to LED. Even the traffic lights became brighter.
Yeah, yeah,
Now
yeah.
many street lights are brighter. So there is a huge amount of light pollution, not only for our wildlife, even for us. There is a lot of light pollution that's going on. And if we can be careful, mindful about light, sometimes at home, at least where we have complete control, we can dim down light instead of having light switches. I think one should have dimmer switches throughout the house. And then,
There is a problem with dimmer switches, though, because a
yeah,
dimmer switch is not recommended for most building biologists because they will invariably introduce dirty electricity, these high voltage
I see.
transit into the circuit, which is going to have other
I see.
negative biological consequences. So,
Mm.
you can just get the right style bulb rather than
Yeah,
turning those
yeah,
down. And
yeah,
anyway, a lot of LEDs that people are using now aren't going to work. An incandescent would work, but not an LED.
yeah,
Some LEDs can, but not
yeah,
most don't.
yeah. And then now there are quite a few companies that are also selling blue filtering eyeglasses, but make sure that you don't
Yeah.
wear them during daytime.
Yeah, let's talk. Yeah, it's crazy to do that. I mean, unless you're in, at least as my exception, you're in a
Yeah,
lecture hall where there's no natural light
yeah,
and there's just this terrible blue light only from the LEDs or the fluorescents. Do you
yeah.
think that exposure with none of the balancing near infrared? Do you think that exposure during the daytime is harmful from a circadian rhythm perspective?
Well, we haven't actually looked at that carefully because one is short term and then the long term
Mm-hmm.
exposure. And this is where there is not much research going on, although there is a lot of research needs because
Mm-hmm.
of heterogeneous nature of our human environment. For example,
Mm-hmm.
our kids,
Mm-hmm.
they go to school now, they're staying almost the entire day in dimly lit
Mm-hmm.
classrooms with projectors that are showing what they have to learn. So whole day they're just in dimly lit classroom.
Or even worse, looking at their tablet or computer screen all day long.
Yeah,
It's like part of the curriculum in many schools, as I
yeah,
understand.
yeah. So so as I said, it boils down to one thing. We didn't know about lighting, and now that we are learning so much about light, it happened only 16 years ago, and people
Mm-hmm.
really started looking at it maybe 10 years ago more seriously into humans. We
Mm-hmm.
have a long way to go, but at the
Okay.
same time, I'm happy that there are a
We're
lot
starting
of
the progress.
there are a lot of progress in terms of setting guidelines
Mm-hmm.
for builders, for even lighting designers, architects, all of them to start to think about these issues and incorporate that into design.
And what's your best guess as to the greater danger after sunset when you really need to restrict these blue light frequencies? And that depends, of course, on where you're at. Unless you're really far north or far south of the equator, then it becomes a little bit ludicrous. And I'm not sure that's too healthy to live in those
Yeah, yeah.
latitudes. But is it the intensity of the light, this 100, 500 lumen light, or is it the color frequency? So if you filter out like all the blues and you have like a red light, like you're blocking everything, you're only seeing red and white. Does the intensity of the light matter in that area?
Yeah, so it's a function of both light intensity and spectral quality or light
Yes.
color.
Yeah.
And the good thing is, yes, when you're going to that orange to red spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
then there is less harm because it's very less effective in reducing melatonin. So as people wear those eyeglasses or change the lighting to that spectrum, then what's likely to happen is the melatonin level, natural body melatonin level, may begin to rise earlier, and they will fall sleepy. They will fall asleep much earlier than being exposed to electrical lighting that's not filtered out.
And I know that, and it's integrated into my lifestyle. But when people complain about trouble falling asleep, it relative, it's not the first thing that pops into my mind to mention to filter the blue light, because the assumption is that everyone knows what I know, that you just shouldn't be looking at blue light after sunset.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not true. It's probably a very small percentage, way less than 5% of the population who understand or apply this.
Yeah, a very small percentage of people who actually know it or understand it and apply it. And also, not everybody knows what type of blue filtering glasses to use, because now there is anything and everything that claims to be blue filtering. Even the other day I saw some glasses that filter out only 430 nanometer to 450 nanometer, and they claim this is blue filtering. Yes, in some way it is blue filtering, but it's not filtering out the blue light that activates melanopsin and reduces melatonin.
Yeah. Where do you think you have to put the cutoff of how many nanometers?
So I think it's there are some studies coming out showing somewhere between 460 and 490 is the most effective for reducing melatonin. So it should.
If you're filtering everything above 500, you should be okay.
Yeah. If you're having only above 500. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know, because that's actually, yeah, of course, because that's actually doesn't really impair your vision much at all. You put on the red filters and boy, you can hardly see anything.
Yeah.
Your visual acuity goes to heck in a handbasket.
Yeah.
That is good to know. I wasn't aware of that. But would you say that a simple way, because many people aren't going to have the technical capacity to measure those wavelengths, would you say a simple way would just find a blue light, which can be an LED and a lot of the indicators for your equipment? I've got them on my clocks, not my clocks, my timing circuits. So there's blue lights there when they're on, and it is put the glass in front of it, and if that light disappears, is blocking. Would you say that's a good one?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's
okay. It doesn't cost anything. It's to find a blue light.
Yeah.
Because I've purchased a few of these, glasses that claim to block the light, and you look at them, and you can see the blue light is clear as day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not working.
Yeah, so that's why I said that there are a lot of different brands, different blue light blockers, but not everything is created equal.
Yeah. So, okay, well, that's pretty good. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, the other thing that really contributes to this is the eating, and you've done a lot of work in this, and you really want to focus on that, because that's where you really have made some really good advances. And it's such a profoundly important concept. It's not so much, it's not so much what you eat, as Dr. Gundry would say, it's what you don't eat. But then beyond that, it's the timing of your food that's so important. So why don't you help us understand that a bit? Because I think it has profound implications on your health. Yeah.
So the timing, just like the simple way to look at it is, just like your brain needs some downtime to sleep, and we do that, and we know that's very essential. Similarly, almost every organ in our body needs some downtime. Your stomach needs some downtime, liver, muscle, fat, everything. And it's not just 8 hours of sleeping will do. Many of these organs actually need somewhere between 12 to 16 hours of downtime, minimum 12 hours of no food, so that they can repair themselves. And another simple way to think about it is just think about your stomach lining. Whole day we are eating a lot of different food. They have to be digested, absorbed. There's a lot of damage done to the stomach lining throughout the day, and it needs to be repaired. Needs to be repaired every night. And just like you cannot repair a highway when the traffic is still flowing, you cannot completely repair your gut if you are just keep on eating into the rest time. So that's why what we have done in the laboratory condition where we can control everything, we take a group of mice born to the same mother in the same room with the same gut microbiome, everything same weight. We divide them into two groups. One group gets the diet, typical American diet, high fat, high sucrose diet, whenever they want to eat. So they will eat throughout day and night. And the second group gets the same number of calories from the same diet every day. And they are allowed to eat somewhere between 8 to 12 hours. In some experiments, we have done 8 hours, 9 hours, 10, 11, 12. Sometimes we did up to 15 hours, but the 15 hours doesn't work. So when these mice are eating in this what we call time restricted eating, where timing is restricted, calories not restricted,
And let me just
then
hold you there for a moment, because I think that's an important point. It's a minor point, but because there's a lot of different names for this, intermittent fasting would be, and even in the literature is time restricted feeding. But I like the term TRE, or time restricted eating. Is that your favorite term?
yeah. So
Right.
that's so we use time restricted feeding for animals because we can they can.
Oh, okay, that's the difference. Okay, so time restricted eating for humans. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, good.
Humans, yeah, we are not going to be feeding a lot. So. and, and then, but these mice are on time restricted feeding for 8, 10, or 12 hours. Then, although they're eating the same number of calories from the same food, they're completely protected from obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, systemic inflammation, high cholesterol, a lot of different diseases. And more importantly, now if we take fat mice and then put them on time restricted eating at 9 to 10 hours, eating, or even 8 hours sometimes, then we can reverse many of this disease. And that's the surprising fact, because right now, even there is no single medication that can treat a mouse to cure its obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, high cholesterol, fatty liver disease, all at the same time.
Mhm.
But this one trick can reverse that all in mice. And that's the most exciting, most profound result I have seen in the last 20 years of my research. Of course, melanopsin is still
Yeah,
number one.
that's your baby. Yeah,
That's my baby.
yeah.
And then now we have been doing this research in humans, and many different stuff have come out of it. And what we are finding is almost many chronic diseases can be the severity can be lessened and sometimes can be reversed by this concept of time restricted eating.
Yeah, and it's so impressive, and to me, the most significant proof of the fact that a calorie is not a calorie, because the studies that you refer to with the rats, and I suspect that there's probably clinical trials going on now, also, that you give the people the same amount of calories, same food, identical food, but just change the timing, and you have these dramatic differences.
Yeah, so because
of
the
this quality of food, it's identical food.
Yeah, so that's why I say timing can make a healthy food junk.
That's a good point. It's a very good point.
Yeah.
So let me just talk about the window of eating, the time restricted eating, because there's a bit of, I would really love to hear your feedback on this, because I've interviewed Walter Longo, who is in your area of the world, and of course, one of the leading researchers in intermittent fasting, published hundreds of studies on this. And his personal belief, and he wrote the book, The Longevity, I think. I'm not sure.
Longevity diet.
Yeah, longevity diet. That's what I was. I was missing a word on it. So, and his contention was, he based it on historical observations, that it really shouldn't be as small as possible. Like he really believes it's harmful if you go down to reduce that window down to 4 hours. But it seems like the research is suggesting 6 or 8. So I'm wondering if you think there's any damage in reducing it to smaller. Like Stephen Gundry, who I've interviewed a few times, actually practices most of the year where he's only eating in a 2-hour window. So do you think there's any danger of radically reducing that too much? Or do you think it should be cycle, like maybe 3 or 4 days a week if you're eating within a 12-hour period, and another 4 days or 5 days you're eating in a 6 to 8 hour window? What's the optimum? If you could design a system that's ideal biologically, what would it be?
Well, so the way I look at it is this: we have to be in bed for 8 hours, at least 8 hours.
Yeah, give your body the opportunity to sleep for 8 hours, maybe even 9.
Yeah, opportunity to sleep for 8 hours, and during those 8 hours, we are not waking up in our REM sleep and eating. So, okay, so 8 hours or 9 hours, no food. And then it's also a common sense not to eat within 2 hours before going to bed, because your stomach.
Well, I don't know if it's common sense, but
at least the scientific, there is enough scientific data.
Absolutely, from the scientific perspective. Many people don't do that intuitively at all.
Yeah. So now you got 9 plus 2 hours, 11 hours you are not eating. And then right after you wake up, your cortisol level is beginning to rise, and then your melatonin is still high. It's taking some time to fall off. Give yourself 1 hour to balance these hormones before you start putting anything in your mouth. So that brings 11 plus 1, 12 hours. So obviously, we can agree that one should not eat for 12 hours.
At least at a
At
bare
least.
minimum.
That's the bare minimum.
So
But
there appears to
now,
be benefits to going beyond that, though.
yeah. So now,
because if you just do 12 hours, wouldn't you agree that that's not sufficient enough to get the benefits that you're talking about in the observation of the mice studies?
Yeah, so at 12, you just maintain your health. You are not going to reverse some of the disease. You may not be able to reverse. Of course, if someone was eating 16, 17 hours, went back to 12, he may
it's going to
reverse some of the things.
Sure.
So now, the question is how short one can go, and this is where there is some limitation in doing control studies like we do in animals, where we can do this for a long period of time. Because if you reduce access to food for less than 6 hours in many animals, they will reduce their caloric intake. So then we cannot figure out whether the benefit or harm we are seeing is due to reduction in calorie or reduction in timing. So there is a barrier that we cannot do this experiment in a very controlled study to see its long-term effect.
That's a very good point. But isn't that the same barrier that exists in humans? I mean,
in humans, the same thing. If you reduce the time window, yes, some people will reduce their calorie. And some of the old studies have shown, and when I say old studies, these are 70s and 80s and study. They found that a small proportion of women only, it's not significant in men, who self-reported that they ate for 8 hours or shorter duration. 8 or 10 hours, I don't remember. I think it's 8 or 10, something like that. Then a very small number of them, out of hundreds of them, maybe tens of them, reported having gallstone or gall sludge 10 years later. Okay, and that's the paper people usually refer to when they say. But at the same time, the same study, these women, when they're asked whether they were dieting, the term dieting, then women who were dieting, they actually had much higher risk of gallstone. So now, if you fast forward and then see control study done in 80s and 90s, what they have found is, particularly this is found among women who try to lose a lot of weight within very short period of time, whether by reducing calorie, doing anything else, they might develop increased bile acid, bile crystal formation. So it has to be rapid weight loss. That's the common denominator. So what we think is, if somebody is trying to do all the good things in the world by eating a small caloric restriction, time restriction, doing a lot of exercise, then at the same time, we don't have hydration level, because in these 80s, 70s, and 80s studies, we don't know how much water they were drinking to dilute the bile acids that they were secreting. Then I think if all of these get together, little hydration, less window of time when you're eating, and you have also reduced calories, and you're spending a lot of energy in exercise to reduce rapidly a lot of weight, that might be harmful to your body.
Okay. So if you're not don't have all those criteria, dieting and being overweight and not, but it's assuming the person is healthy. As healthy as can be typically. And they're eating really good food, and they're not. What would be the ideal window? And do you think that window should be cycled, which is another important variable here, because there's so many components of our biology that you just can't do. Like, you can't do ketogenic diet continuously. I believe it's going to harm you. So you have to cycle it. So would this time restricted eating fall into the same concern? If you do it continuously for too long, is that going to be problematic?
No, I think the way I look at it is, as we discussed, 12 hours time restricted eating is something that
it's a basic.
Everybody should do. It's like brushing your teeth every day.
There's our movement. You got breathing.
Breathing. Yeah. So this is in that category. 12 hours eating, and what is surprising is only 10% of the population eat for 12 hours or shorter.
No, you have got to be kidding.
No, we did the study.
10%.
So
10%. That is crazy.
Now, only 10%
That is,
consistently eat within 12 hours.
oh my gosh. That
So
is just beyond shocking.
when I said 12, it's like a big shock for a lot of people because they think, oh my God, I cannot eat within 12 because
Oh gosh.
so,
Once you get into this, as you well know, because I'm sure these are some of your daily patterns too. There's not a hunger issue. Once you don't have the insulin resistance, there is no hunger. It's just like you do fine.
Yeah.
Oh,
so that's what happened. So
okay, so 12. But so do you think is there benefit? I mean, because intermittent fasting, I think, provides a lot of metabolic benefits. So, but do you think there should be cycling to the intermittent fasting? So
that's what I
18
say.
hours.
Yeah, so that's why I say that once in a while, just like brushing your teeth, but at the same time, you have to go to dentist.
Yeah.
Once in 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
That is your 8-hour eating, maybe for a month or so in a year, or depending on what conditions you have, you can go down.
So you're more aligned with Dr. Longo's approach, with not really extending it too long. So because he was more than a 12, 14-hour range of time restricted eating. Yeah, because he didn't really like anything longer. He thought it was problematic because, from his perspective, there was no historical precedence for cultures that did that regularly. And I think that's an interesting argument, and certainly.
Now, for example, there are a lot of people who do. So in India, there is a religion called Jainism, and the strict practitioners of this religion, they don't eat after sunset, and they have been doing it for centuries. And there is no serious health issue that distinguishes them from other people. So there are precedents for people doing this kind of practice for generations and centuries.
Considering the integration of the time restricted eating and the circadian rhythm, I think that's a very valuable practice. It's one that I pretty much do all the time. I typically, last in the middle of the winter when sunset is a lot earlier, but even then I still eat before sunset.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's something I follow all the time, unless I'm occasionally traveling and there's some social interactions, but that's not common. Yeah. So wow, this is great. Now I want to take we're going to go back to this because I know you've got some special projects and some apps, and the people watching this can participate in that. But I had a specific question because NAD, one of the most important metabolic coenzymes for redox balance in your body and energy metabolism, is generated through a salvage pathway, about 95% of it through an enzyme. And the rate-limiting enzyme is NAMPT. Which appears to be under circadian control. And I've read the papers on it. I'm still as confused as heck. So is it with the chicken or the egg? Is it the circadian rhythm that gets disrupted that causes NAMPT impairment, or is it the NAMPT that helps set the circadian rhythm?
So it goes both ways because the NAD also affects sirtuins, and then sirtuins are integrated with circadian rhythm. And NADH ratio or NADPH ratio also affects how clock and BMAL, these two transcription factors, bind to DNA. So the bottom line that we have seen with circadian rhythm is if the clock regulates something, then there is a reciprocal feedback regulation from that output into the clock. And that's the best way you can create a homeostatic system. So it's always the chicken and egg story.
Right. It's still. So obviously, your belief is that if you're honoring doing all these approaches that we described here and more extensively in your book, that you're going to optimize NAD production because you're optimizing your circadian rhythm.
Yeah. Okay. You will optimize multiple different health aspects.
Okay. Aside from NAD, which is really important.
Yeah.
All right. So let's tangent back to the time restricted eating and the research that you're doing on that. You've designed a very clever app that you can put on your phone. I think is it on Android too?
Yes, it's on both Android and
the name of your app is My Circadian Rhythm, or
My Circadian Clock.
My Circadian Clock. Sorry.
Yeah. So people have to go to the website first and
download the app,
and then do the informed consent, and then
Yeah, and it's
download the app.
really elegant. I encourage everyone here watching to do this if you're interested, because it's going to help you out. There's no charge for it, and you're going to contribute to the research. So why don't you talk about the app, what it does, and what the intention of your research is?
Yeah, so the intention of the so that's how we figured out that less than 10% of the people eat for 12 hours.
And you publish this, right?
Yeah, it's published in 2015 in Cell Metabolism. So the first study that was done was the previous version of the app, where people had to log their food by taking a picture. So and the previous version was very simple: open your app, one click, then take a picture, second click, and press save, third click, and it used to save the picture in our server.
Mm-hmm.
And we mostly were interested in timing, and we asked people to self monitor themselves for 2 weeks, because we know that our weekday weekends might be different, and we just want to get a broader picture of what is your lifestyle from one day to another. And then after 2 weeks, people can self-select whether they want to eat all their food within 10 hours, 12 hours, 8 hours, whatever. You are free to do whatever you want to do. The reason being, we want to see if we have large number of people, tens of thousands of people, then in every bucket we'll have some large number of people doing 10 hours, 8 hours, even 6 hours or 12 hours. And over a long period of time, we can figure out what is good or bad for people. And in this new app, you can log your food. It also has um, other bells and whistles. You can the phone can be paired with your your Google Health or Apple Health Kit, so it can extract your step counts, sleep, etc. You're also welcome to enter your own sleep. Every morning, it can ask you how was your sleep quality, because most of the wearables don't record what is your subjective. How did you really feel? How was your sleep? And once we are collecting this information, after 12 weeks, we also want you to enter your body weight. And if you are a quantified self fanatics and you have been collecting a lot of other health data, then it's good to enter that. And that's how it will help to figure out in an epidemiological level, in real life situation, what is our habit and how we can change it. The same app is being used in many controlled clinical studies. There are nearly 10 different studies going on in different parts of the world that use the same app with a slightly modified version to do all these studies. So in that way, we can benefit from controlled study as well as this large open to all kind of studies.
Yeah. So do you have the option in your app to import data from others, like the Aura Ring, which generates some
Yeah.
pretty significant? So you can import the Aura Ring data?
Yeah. So what happens is any wearable that puts data into Health Kit or Google Fit, once that is shared with Health Kit or Google Fit, then we can capture the data from the same basket.
Okay, so you got to put it into Google Fit and then export it from there.
Yeah. So even when you wear the Aura Ring, it asks you, do you want to put the data into Google Fit or Health Kit?
Okay.
And if you said yes, then one time, then we can capture the data.
Okay, perfect.
The reason why we're doing this study in this way, where anybody can download, if you think carefully, almost every drug, every lifestyle, anything that the biomedical research community has tested, those have been tested maybe in 20 or 40 different medical school or biomedical research center in the US or anywhere in the world. And people who participated in those studies lived within 20 to 40 miles maximum. Those who had time and those who had the incentive and did this. But vast majority of us, we live away from those research centers, and vast majority of us don't have the time or the incentive to go participate in those studies. So that's why we thought this is another way to do capture some kind of research data from citizen scientists who are ready to share their data and help biomedical research.
Yeah, so since it's My Circadian Clock app, is there a section that captures data where you can enter it with respect to your light exposure too? Because it seemed to me that would be an important part of the analysis.
Yeah, so we haven't integrated that into My Circadian Clock. We have another app called My Lux Recorder, one
Oh, okay.
word. MYLUX recorder, and it's only available from
Apple.
iOS, Apple.
I was, yeah.
And that's actually a very nifty tool. So you can go anywhere and open the app, point the phone towards any light source or ambient light and record it. And you'll have a history of wherever you have been. And it actually shows you in a map, and you can email yourself all the data. And it's a kind of nifty tool to, for example, I know in Dallas Airport, there are some terminals that are dimly lit, and then there are other terminals that have very bright, nice light. And in Chicago, ORD is very nice, brightly lit during daytime, and they actually dim down these days at night.
Yeah.
Whereas Atlanta has very bright light even at nighttime.
Yeah, they do. I just actually, it's one of my favorite airports. I pretty much go through Atlanta almost every month.
Yeah,
it's so symmetrical and contemporary. But I never really passing there through outside of sunset or sunrise. So
yeah.
So I notice it because it's supposed to be bright.
Yeah, it is very bright.
Yeah. So do these two apps integrate with each other?
No, they haven't integrated with each other because the light app we developed it later on, and it's really hard to integrate these two. But hopefully we can do that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So definitely we'll put links to those.
Yeah. And I'll send you the links.
Yeah, the life's a little more restrictive, of course, because it's not an Android yet. But but the My Circadian Clock is something that everyone should consider. And when a person participates in this research for 12 weeks, what is the benefit that they can anticipate to receive, other than knowing that they've contributed to research?
Yeah. So what we typically see is within 2 to 3 weeks, people begin to see improvement in their sleep. And also improvement in acid reflux or heartburn. So there are 64 million people in this country who get prescription for acid reflux or heartburn every year.
64 million. That's just prescriptions, not even over the counter, which used to be prescriptions.
This is only prescription. If you go to NIDDK website, it describes.
Wow. So that's what, a seventh of the population now, maybe an eighth.
No, that's 320 million is total, so it's 1/5 almost. Yeah.
1/5. Yeah. Oh, jeez, that's crazy.
Yeah. And then after between 4 and 6 weeks, they will begin to see that daytime energy level is pretty high, because that's the time when you get rid of the hunger pangs in evening, and you're still feeling very healthy, sleeping well, and daytime you're feeling energetic. Then between 6 to 12 weeks, that's the time. If you have any pre-diabetes, or if your blood glucose level is somewhere between 100 and 115, 120, that's the time many people will see improvement in their fasting blood glucose level. And some people who have mildly hypertensive, maybe somewhere between 120 and 140 millimeter systolic, they might see some drop, 5 to 10 millimeter mercury drop in blood pressure. Then, actually, I had a list here. One thing that happens is a lot of people have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. This is mostly for teenagers and college students. They go to the bathroom too many times. It's irritating for them. They might see an improvement in between 8 to 12 weeks. Because I think what happens is the microbiome population improves, and also their gut repairs very well. And once the gut repair improves, then systemic inflammation goes down. So between 8 to 12 weeks, that's when a lot of people report that their joint pain goes down, because that's a good sign of inflammation. And when chronic inflammation goes down, then the joint pain goes down. Then once in a while, we get random reports. For example, some people who have inflammatory disease, autoimmune disease, they sometimes say the severity has gone down. Even we have a few reports, although this is all self-report, anecdotal. Multiple sclerosis, we had at least a dozen people who reported that their severity went down. For women, what we have seen, there is some caveat. Some women want to do everything together, so they will reduce calorie and time restrict, which is not a good thing to do.
Mm.
Um, but if they're doing a healthy amount of food and healthy calorie and time restriction, then we often hear from young adults, young women, that their menstrual cycle improves. It's more periodic. And so these are some of the things that they experience within that 12 weeks. And we cannot say what happens beyond 12 weeks. For example, since the chronic inflammation goes down, it might have better effect on their long-term heart health and cancer risk, etc. But those are not the things that they will feel within that 12 weeks.
Mm. Great. Now, one of the other things working in the circadian rhythm is knowing when your optimal biological activity is, especially from a mental perspective. And I think you put that range for most people about 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. If you want to get something done and really work on it. That's like,
yeah, so that's typically the optimal time, between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m.
Mhm.
That's when our mental acuity is at its peak, and executive function is also pretty high. So have your most important meetings, etc., during that interval.
Okay, perfect. Well, is there anything else you'd like to emphasize or mention about the circadian rhythm? I mean, we could talk for hours. There's so much information there. We really only touched on a few important items in the book. I mean, it's really is enlightening. There's a lot of great information in it.
Thank you.
Yeah, because you go into so many different areas that are so crucial for optimizing your health.
Yeah, means what happens is, at the end of it, people might get overwhelmed, but at the end of the day, it's very simple. Try to be in bed somewhere between 8 to 9 hours, and after waking up, if you have time.
Well, let me just stop you there. So give your body the opportunity to sleep.
Yeah.
And this is one thing I didn't really fully appreciate, because it's just this lack of understanding that most people aren't doing this stuff. I'm just literally shocked that 90% of people don't eat within 12 hours. I mean, that's so basic, but there's also not exposing their eyes to this blue light. So getting an opportunity for 9 hours, but then not having blue light after sunset.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a daytime, at least get 30 minutes of daylight. You don't have to stare at the sun. Even sitting next to a window or under shade is fine. And then eat somewhere between, say, 8 to 10 hours.
Excuse me for interrupting there, but is that partially because we did talk about this, but the bright light exposure, and maybe you can mention the minimum amount of lumens that you need to do this, is a requirement for optimizing melatonin production. If you don't have that, even if you don't have the bright light at night or the blue light, you're not going to get as much melatonin if you don't have the bright light in the daytime. Is that right?
In the daytime, it has a different function. So daytime bright light helps you to, if there is any residual melatonin in your system in the daytime, that will make you sleepy. And to reduce that, you need that bright light. Second is,
interesting. Okay.
Bright light will also improve mood, and that's now shown that's independent of melatonin. So bright light is the best antidepressant out there. It's plentiful and free, so just step outside for 30 minutes. And then,
unless you live in Seattle or winter.
So what is interesting is, even on an overcast day in Seattle,
really,
there is still 10,000 lux of light outside.
Wow.
10,000 lux. So, and in the sunny day in Florida, there is 150 to 200,000 lux. That's too much light.
I'm probably getting well over about 150,000 most days of the week. So
yeah.
You think there is? So you think that is excessive, and you think that it would be unwise to have that type of exposure for a long time?
Well, I mean, it's good to have that amount of it. No, the thing is, I must say that we don't know everything about melanopsin or light reception. So there must be other functions that happen only at very high intensity light, and that we don't understand yet. And then pick your 8 to 10 hours to eat, and maximum you can go up to 12, but not beyond 12.
Okay.
And dim down your light. Yeah.
Okay, so 8 to 10 is from your analysis was your recommendation, 8 to 10.
What we do in our clinical studies is we recommend to stick to 10 hours, because we know a lot of people will have weekend stuff, and then they will go down to 12 and still they're okay. So that's why we tell them
And is this what is confirmed in all the research data you've collected through your app?
So we have done 10 hours. There are quite a few studies that have gone down to 8 hours time restricted eating.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is one from Courtney Peterson in University of Alabama, Birmingham. She did a 6 hours time restricted eating.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are various flavors of it. What we find is most palatable to most people is 10 hours because that's one target they can work towards. And even with family life, they can still stay within 12, between 10 and 12.
That is a really important pragmatic observation because, I like to go, I'm obsessive compulsive, and I have the opportunity to do that because I don't have a family, limited social interactions, and I could easily do 6 or even 4, but you have to be pragmatic. Most people, that's not possible. So 10 is what you found is doable for most people.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really solid advice. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's it. Did I interrupt any others?
No, I think we covered most of it.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Well, so the name of the book again is the Circadian Code. The name of the app is the Circadian Clock, or My Circadian Clock.
My Circadian Clock.
Yeah, all one word, and you can get it on the App Store through iOS or Android, and download it. There's no charge for it, and it'll help you out and continue to contribute to the research. And pick up the book if you have any interest in this area, because I can promise you with a high degree of confidence that you will not be disappointed. It's written, you have a very good writing style, so it's easy to understand. It's a pleasure to read. Some books are, I just really, I struggle to get through them because it's just so hard. Not because of technical complexity, it's just that the writer is so poor, but yours was really well written. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for watching. Remember, hit the like and subscribe button so you can get more videos that can help you and your family take control of your health.